Well, welcome back to the Better Everyday podcast, where we're unlocking our best self one episode at a time. My name is Grace Garcia, and this is my wonderful, great, handsome husband, David Garcia.
What's up?
Now, today's episode was a bit my idea, and
A lot your idea.
I want to preface by saying there might be spoilers. So if you care, maybe do what you have to do and then watch this episode first. And what I mean by is it's going to be about the book now made a movie. It Ends With Us.
Also, by the time that this episode comes out, if you haven't seen the movie, then you probably won't see the movie.
So, again, if you don't care about spoilers, keep watching. But I'll leave that up to you. So, when I first read It Ends With Us, it was a while ago. I think it was like over a year ago. That was one of the first books that made me cry for like a long time. Like I cried because for me, it hit not so close to home, but it hit pretty close. And so I remember telling you about it and saying like, David, you have to read it. And I never thought that would actually be a thing. But fast forward, I saw the trailer of It Ends With Us and I was like, David, they're making it a movie. Can you please read it? Because my husband loves me so much. He actually read the whole book, you guys. I still can't believe it. I was shocked that he even agreed to it, but he did. And then he watched the movie, which this isn't like a review about the movie / book, but what I want to talk about is why the book reminded me so much of your story. And when you were reading it, there were some pretty impactful like statements you made that I'm like, you know what, we should talk about that, because what if other people see themselves in that situation? Whether it's exactly like it, worse, or in our case, I didn't even see you because it wasn't like verbatim. And so that's kind of what we want to talk about today. So I don't know if you want to explain why the book, why I recommended it to you, like why it reminded me of you.
You can explain that. Okay.
I just don't know like what to say, but you let me know if I'm like going too close or not. Because it's your story. It's your family story. So one of the reasons why it just like made me bawl is, to be honest, and this might make me sound insensitive, but this is what I was thinking prior to reading it. You know, we always ask those questions like, why do women stay in abusive relationships? Like, if she's being hit, beaten, like, why just not leave, walk away, especially when kids are involved?
Before you keep going, maybe you should lay out what exactly we're talking about, because right now, with the way that we kind of open, it's kind of like assuming that everybody knows what this book is, what it's about, what the movie's about, like that everybody read it and everybody knows. Like, okay.
Well, it is about domestic violence. It's about a girl who herself, she witnessed it with her mom. Her mom was beat by her dad, and she said, I'm never going to be in a relationship like this. Like, she hated her dad. And then when it came to her love story, she falls in love with the man who, like, reading it seems like, oh my gosh, like you would want to love him. Like he has every right characteristics. But then slowly you start unfolding that he does have a temper, that it seems like it's quote unquote accidents that keep happening, but it's because of his temper. And it seems like she's slowly like losing the boundary of like he's hitting her, like he's throwing her or whatever it is. And there comes a moment where she is pregnant with her, his baby. And she has to make the decision, do I stay with him because I love him so much, or does it end with us? And that's why it's called It Ends With Us. And it's called It Ends With Us. So you can imagine what she chose. She chose to leave. She chose to break the cycle. And it is, as Christians, we believe in like generational curses and cycles that if we are not proactive and break them, like it's just going to continue on. And so when I was reading the book, the reason why I think it impacted me so much is because I was always one of those women of, well, it's easy, just walk away. Like, why are you choosing to stay? But what I love about a book and what I love about storytelling is I found myself like not falling in love with the character, but like rooting for her. Like she's falling in love and you get to see her emotions. And so you're like, marry the guy, and you see all his wonderful attributes and you're like rooting for them. And then you start trying to justify why he's hitting her. Like you're like, oh, it was just once. Oh, it was just twice. Like he can get help. He said he'll seek help. And you start justifying it and you're like, oh my goodness, is this what women do in real life? And then at the end, when she's in that kind of like a crossroads, you're like, no, don't divorce him, please. Like now you have a baby. Like maybe he might change for her. And again, you start justifying it and you're like, you catch yourself, oh my goodness, I get it now. Like I get why women, and this is just my perspective reading a story. If you're feeling it and you're in love and you're like in it, that I can imagine it even being way harder to walk away than me just reading the story. But the reason why I like cried in it, I felt like it was just so close to home, is because it reminded me of your story of your mom. Mm-hmm. And you told me a little bit like about what happened, that your mom was a victim of domestic violence, mm-hmm. but she unfortunately way later like got a divorce when you were already married.
Yeah.
She stayed with your dad. I'm assuming it's because of love and because of you guys. Like that is her story to tell. But I was just like, oh my goodness, like I saw kind of what would happen like if a woman decides not to walk away. And I'm like, you didn't have to go through that. Like, I wonder what it would have been if she was like, it ends with her. And when you were the firstborn. So when you're a baby, mm-hmm. like I can imagine, like regardless the situation, it both is difficult. Like both parts kind of have a sad story. And even in your dad, I saw it from the dad's perspective of like, you end up saying, oh, hurt people. Like the man, it's not his fault. Like he was dealt a bad deck of cards. Like from a small child, he had a horrible life. And you kind of saying like, it's not his fault. Like you want to help him. And, you can only do so much. Like it's up to them if they want to change or not. And so you're like, no, like you kind of want to coddle them and say, it's okay. I'll be with you. I'll stay with you. And so I'm like, oh, and your dad, you told me like he was one of 14 kids or something.
18.
And we like were saying, and you were saying, I can imagine the love that he didn't receive and stuff. So I'm just like, but your dad deserves love too. And it's just crazy because you start justifying of like, okay, maybe it's good that she stayed, but then it hurt you. And so that's why I cried, because I feel like it made me understand your mom a little bit more. And I was just like, you dealt with it. Like you saw it firsthand. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to take it from here, how did you feel reading it? Because you are you. You actually saw that in your home. I didn't. I'm just imagining based off of what I'm reading and what you told me.
Jokingly, it was hard to read because of like it's a very girly book.
Yeah.
Like when it talks about like when we first kissed and it reverberated to my stomach, like that to me is just like it was a very hard read.
It's a romance novel, right?
Yeah, it's from a guy's perspective, mm-hmm. that part. But when it started getting into like the real stuff, like, oh, like now there's issues, and now because the first like 2 times was quote unquote accidental, like, and then he was very sorry and mm-hmm. like, but the first time that I really got triggered with that book was she was describing a scene that she saw her parents go through. Mm. And I texted you, I was like, homegirl, why would you make me read this? Like, this is triggering to me, like flashbacks. And I talk to my brother sometimes and we kind of joke around with it. That's our like a coping mechanism. Yeah. And we go like, hey dude, like whenever you hear somebody, like a girl scream or whatever, like, does it trigger you? And we both are just like, yeah, like it drives our anxiety through the roof. Like certain sounds make us like triggered. Reading that book made me triggered, and I'm just like, why am I like reliving this? But then the funny thing is that, well, not funny, but I'm going through
irony.
I don't know if it's ironic, but I'm going through one-on-one counseling right now. Mm. And the one thing that I'm starting to realize is there's a lot of feelings from my past that I've kind of suppressed. I like to use the analogy of I put it in a box and put it in the attic and I completely forgot about it. Yeah. And maybe that was my coping mechanism of like, that's the only way I'm going to survive. Mm-hmm. And so the combination of reading the book, feeling the triggering feelings, and then going to counseling, I'm realizing like maybe I have to like revisit those moments And maybe I have to actually deal with those emotions because I don't think I really have. Like I've been more of like a survival instinct kind of mentality, like just champion through, everything's going to be okay. My mentality has always been hard times always come, but they never last. So just make it through and then you'll be fine. You learn something from it and you keep going, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very triggering. Some of the scenes that were written, I will say that the book is far better than the movie. The movie is just doesn't do the book justice.
Yeah.
I will never read a book first and watch a movie after because I honestly felt like I wasted 2 hours of my life. I'm like, my imagination while reading this book was much better than this movie.
But I liked the movie.
Yeah, you said you cried again, right?
I did cry, yeah.
Yeah, I watched it.
But I think because I'm a woman.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, it triggered me. I obviously, me and my brother both have experienced that, and I think it's going to be with us for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, and I remember when you told me that, like that you were triggered. I can't even imagine, and I'm sorry if you're a woman listening that you firsthand, because we're talking about like, I'm just hearing your stories and you even seen it, but that woman, your mom, like the victim themselves, I can't even imagine. And you've said it's not even the victim getting hurt, it's everyone that the victim loves getting hurt.
Yeah.
And so if you yourself have been through that situation, just know that if you are like, okay, I want to read it, maybe like if it's triggering and emotional to us, just be prepared to tread lightly. Yeah. And well, I feel like there's so many different facets we can go into this conversation. But so you first got triggered, you said, because you imagined or you got kind of like flashbacks of your mom in that situation. And so that was kind of one thing that impacted you. But then as you kept reading, there was a message that I was like, whoa, when you said, am I your Ryle? You asked me that. And so if you guys are not familiar, Ryle is her husband, the one who is the abuser. And so you asked me, am I your Ryle? Like basically saying, am I your abuser? And I was just like, oh my goodness. Like I was caught off guard by that and even like shocked and like, wait, why is he saying this? And like, was he? And like thinking about it. So what made you ask that?
Wait,
like,
wait.
what was your thought process?
Now I'm curious though. Like when you asked yourself, was he? Did you come to the conclusion of yes, he was?
No, I said, well, first I was like, I never imagined that. But then I'm like, okay. And then I said, yeah, you verbally abused me. I'm like, when I was reading it, I wasn't like, he's my Ryle. Like I didn't label you as that. But when you're like, am I your Ryle? And then I was like, well, I guess if we're talking verbal abuse, but I didn't like it. Like I didn't like labeling you as that. And I was like, no. And then you're like, no, I was. Or something. But what got you to ask that?
Because when I was reading his story, like reading the book, I identified with him. Not exactly because his story was like he had a very traumatic experience. He didn't come from like domestic violence, so it's written in the book. He came from he killed his little brother, but by accident.
Yeah.
And he shot him in the head, and that doesn't come up in the movie. But he shoots him in the head, and apparently his brains are just everywhere, and he's trying to like hit the brains back into the head, and I think because of that he becomes a neurosurgeon. But anyways, the point is that every time he did something, it was reactive. Like because of this happened, this happened, right? And the first couple of times he's like, no, like I didn't want it to happen. I'm so sorry. And while you read it, you could tell like he's actually sorry.
Yeah. He's a good guy, which is crazy to think. Right? Like you read it and you're like, he loves her. Like
it's just very reactive. It's I think there's a part of the book that says like he would black out in those moments and he would like come to like back to it. And he obviously had like, because I think in the book the sister was like, he's been in counseling since he was a little kid.
Yeah.
And he hadn't been stopping. And clearly he had maybe things that he hadn't talked about yet with his counselor or with his therapist of like, you know, how do I manage these? Like maybe he had never felt jealousy or being angry or whatever, right? But it was always reactive. And I remember, I don't know if we've told the story here, but long story short, our marriage started off really rough. And yeah, mine was reactive, but mine was like long-term reactive. Like it wasn't just like an instant. Mine was like, the gist of it was, you hurt me, so now I'm going to tear you apart. And have we told this story?
Yeah, I believe in one of our marriage episodes, we said how like it was not, we were not in the honeymoon phase. Like it was.
Okay.
But I don't remember exactly what I don't know. But if not, you're going to hear it again.
Yeah. So anyways, it was, our marriage started off rough. I felt, I've shared this with you. Like I felt like trapped in it. Like I was just, I was hurt, obviously. And I've said it here before and I've said it again. Like whenever I like feel hurt, especially pain, I think a lot of guys are like this. Like our go-to response is anger. That's the easiest response.
Yeah. That's
the easiest outlet for us. And so, yeah, I was very hurt. I felt like I was tricked into the marriage. We had a sit down with your mom and your dad, and that was kind of like a big time that rocked me. And I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna try. And then like all these thoughts came into my head, like, David, you're not a quitter. Like you can make this work. But at the same time, I'm just like, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
And it was just a lot of emotions. And so I wasn't very healthy. I mean, at the beginning of our marriage, I had just moved and just experienced a lot of like, I guess, trauma from my family as well. Which is not an excuse, but like I wasn't mature enough to take responsibility for my emotions and for my actions. And so I was like, you know what? She made me go through this. So my response was just like, I'm going to make her feel just as bad as I do. And I only know one way to do it. And at the time we didn't know like our personality traits or like the Enneagram or whatever, like,
yeah.
And, but later on we found out like you're a 3, which like you need the words of affirmation. You need, all that positive words. And I was doing the complete opposite. So really I was like tearing you to pieces. And yeah, because of that, like that lasted like a year or so.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's where I was like, I was Ryle. And that's honestly when I came to that conclusion and I asked her that, it was like a big like, I guess kind of punch in the gut or like I don't know, like a moment of reflection. And I'm like, this girl left her Ryle. I'm like, Grace, even though like there was a mistake done or whatever, like she had every right to leave me. Because I was not treating her the way that she deserved to be treated, you know, regardless of your mistake. And so, yeah, you had every right. And I was just like, but she didn't leave. And the way, like, what makes me so grateful and like, it might sound twisted to some people because maybe some people are like, yo, you should have left them. And like, but I mean, now that we're here, like, it makes me so grateful that like, I could see that you believed in the good that was in me, that you believed that we were going to see better days, that we were going to get out of it. And that like, I've always told you, like, my biggest way to bond with you is like going through hard things together.
Yeah.
And for me to reflect on that and be like, even when we weren't really bonded like that, you still had that mentality of, even though it's hard, I'm going to keep believing for better. Even though it's hard, I'm going to keep pushing through. Even though it's hard, I'm going to keep loving. Even like all these things, like, and it just made me grateful because I'm like, she had every right to leave, but she believed in me. She believed in the purpose that God had in me. She believed that there was good in me, and she stuck with me. And now we're in much better days. Yeah. You know, and so, yeah, that's why I identified with Ryle.
Well, and I'm grateful for you because I wouldn't have stayed if you continued. Like there was a moment, and I think we said it like in a marriage podcast where like I was at my wit's end, and I'm like, no, like if you're not going to be a great husband that I know you are, like I'm out of here. And like I served you the $8.99 or whatever, how much it was, divorce papers. And it was you deciding like, I need to be a better husband. I need to be a better father. That made me ultimately stay.
Yeah.
And because I think that's important too, especially you who have witnessed what a bad marriage can do to children. I think you said one of the reasons that kind of woke you up was like my kids. Like I'm not, right now, Grace, I love her, but she's a lot to handle. So you kind of put me on the side and you're like, let me focus on my kids. They didn't do anything wrong to hurt me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to continue like our marriage being horrible for the kids.
Yeah.
And so even though you started for the kids, you became a better man and that strengthened our marriage, which again, you had kind of like a front row seat to what a marriage looks like that didn't work on themselves. And I think as Christians, it's complicated because as I'm reading the book, I'm like, you can't get a divorce. Like we don't believe in divorce. And you're again, rooting for them to stay married. But in your parents' case, it's like, did it do more harm than good? Like at what point should a woman say, it's an ending with me. I'm not going to allow this onto my children. Because even your father, like whether he said intentionally or not, I'm going to affect my kids and my kids' marriage and like their generations. Like I'm sure he wasn't thinking that far ahead. Like he was just like, I am mad and whatever, right? In that situation. But he did affect you and you were bringing that into our marriage, like not knowing how to deal with your emotions. And so taking it out on, you never hit me. You never even raised your voice at me, but like there was verbal abuse. And so as from a kid's standpoint, like when you were there, like does part of you wish your dad wasn't in the picture? Are you like, no, because I know a father figure is important? Like how do you, I don't know if you've thought that, but how do you reconcile those different thoughts?
That's hard. That's very hard. Because of the things that I went through, always lean towards the protection of the kids. When I read the book and it ended and it says the last line is, it ends with us. And I'm like, come on.
Cliche.
Yeah. Well, you're hitting the nail on the head like so hard, you know, but she did it for her kid, you know, which I loved. It was like the way it was written is very like, ugh. But she did it for her kid. And the thing was, you don't know if there will be better days. You can believe all you want, but you don't know if they're going to be better days. And like, in part of the book, the mom speaks to the girl that's married now, and she's in a quote unquote abusive relationship. She just had her kid, and she explained, she's like, you keep accepting things, and you keep basically like what I read was you keep hoping for better days, but the boundary just keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed. And when you keep pushing the boundaries of like what you accept, just like where you started to where you are now, it's just like, oh, well, I've put up with this much already. I might as well just keep going, you know?
Yeah.
Like, no, like there will be better days. And I'm sure that my mom, she's always been a spiritual warrior, always praying, fasting and stuff. And I'm sure there was part of her that believed, you know, and there was like little glimpses of like, oh, things are going to be better. You know, like there was times where a couple months my dad would go to church and we were like, oh, we're finally going to get like what my mom's been praying for the whole time. And then all of a sudden just nope, like out the window. And so how should it have been handled? I don't think there is a right or wrong answer. I think it all depends on the person of what is the hard that they're willing to choose. Because I think that for a woman, what I've seen like personally in my own life, but also I've heard of other cases as well. It's just like the women get into this like mindset, and I think it is enforced by the abusive man of like, you're too small. You can't handle being out in the world by yourself. Like, and especially if you get a really abusive man, like they're drilling that into your head.
Yeah.
You cannot survive without me. You can't make it. You're just going to be out in the streets. And are you going to do that to your kids? Like every single like pound of guilt that man can put on that woman, he will.
And isolating them from their family, from their friends, like for different excuses, right?
Oh yeah. And they'll find, any single manipulative way to like really isolate you. Like, I don't like that person. I don't want you hanging out with that person. I think that person's a bad influence and blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And because a lot of women just like, A, I love him. B, I want to be submissive. Like maybe me listening to him will make him happy and we will. But like from my experience, from what I saw at home, like it didn't work. Like it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And what I do remember are the times that I used to go to my brother's room and I used to cry with him, because my biggest desire in all the world was to protect him from like that.
Yeah.
For him experiencing that. And like, I remember feeling like I could go through it all. I could take all the bullets in the world, but like not my brother, you know? And, you can't cry because you're gonna make me cry.
Well, because you guys don't know, like his brother is 10 years younger than him.
Yeah.
So he was little, and you were little too.
Yeah. Well, the last little bit, I was older. I was like, so when I moved, I was 26. I want to say, I think 26, and so it was like 3 years. Like, so I was like somewhere between 22 to 25, 26, something like that. And so my brother was 12 to 15, 16. Yeah. So like my biggest thing was always like protecting him. Like I wish I could almost like put him in a bubble, just like, you stay in here. And I remember I used to tell him like, you stay in here. Don't come out like for any reason. Like I'll deal with it, whatever. And I remember I would try to figure it out any way possible, like whether it was just being a wall or sometimes like trying to talk my dad down, or like I tried the love approach as well. Like, I'm here for you, like whatever it is. Because as time went on, I just realized like there's a lot of pain in this man. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of pain. And especially like he would like tell himself these stories, or like, I mean, I'm sure he thought that it was truth or whatever, but like not even my own wife has my back. Like when you feel like you have nothing, just like, okay, like I'm going to just explode this all then.
Yeah.
Like we're all going down. Do I wish that my mom would have left? My mom remembers when I was younger. Obviously, I was a little kid, but she did remind me a couple of times. Mm. And I think she put some of that weight on me of like, when you were little, you used to tell me like, don't leave my dad.
Wow.
Yeah. And she would always tell us like, I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this for you. But when I got older, I was like, yo, stop it. Like, no, like like what's created in this household is just like a space of like terror and darkness. Just like, you're doing this for us, you know? And you know, later on, like to be completely honest and transparent, I did like have like, I was carrying some like pain and resentment, because I was just like, how do parents do this? How do parents do this to their kids? Like, how are you not thinking about your kids? Because I think, like you said, like it's pure anger, it's pure hurt, it's just a lot of pure, like selfish emotions. Mm-hmm. And just like, as a parent, I've always had the mentality of like, kids come first. in regards to like safety.
Yeah.
Right. Like in marriage, like I believe that you come first because these kids are going to leave us one day and, whatever, forget about us or come visit us once in a while. But like for being a parent, like you want to protect your kids. Yeah.
They haven't done anything.
At all costs. Like, but just like, no, we would get like stuck in the middle of like these fights. And like, I'm like, how do you do this to your kids? Mm-hmm. How? And, yeah, it was really tough. Do I wish that she left? Maybe. For her sake, she could have saved herself a lot of pain, a lot of abuse, and for Jonathan's sake as well.
And for yours.
I was already busted up. Like the first experience that I had was, I think I was like around 5. And like most of the story is for my mom to tell, right? But from my perspective, like I remember at 5 years old, my mom was sitting down like in the entrance door to the apartment was right in front of her. She was sitting down. She had my dad's shoe in front of her. She was sitting down on the floor, back against the wall. There was a wall in front of the door, and she was bleeding into his shoe. And I remember also seeing a bent knife. So somebody swung at somebody with a knife and I guess missed, hit the wall and just bent the crap. That was a strong,
nasty fight.
Yeah.
But at 5, no 5-year-old should see that.
Yeah. Yeah. So but what I'm saying is like, yeah, I had already, been touched up with some trauma,
Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing. Like if she took the book approach, right? Of like the first maybe couple of times and been like, because that couldn't have been the first time. Because if that was, she'd probably walked away. It had to slowly, her boundary had to get pushed verbally. Her boundary had to get pushed physically, like a shove for it to get to the point where there's a knife involved and blood. Like it's never, that's the first instance.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea. When I was 5, my parents were 25 and 26. So they were pretty young.
Yeah.
They got married, I think at 18. They had me when my mom was 20. My dad was 21. And so they were like young.
Yeah. And
their story is the very just like, I don't even know the details of it, but Civil War happens in El Salvador. My dad comes to Canada on like some sort of sponsorship. He goes to school out in Toronto, goes back for my mom, brings her back, and they land in Winnipeg.
They had you.
Yeah. And you can just imagine like, okay, my mom, I don't know. I've never asked her. Maybe I should ask her like what she was thinking of like, yeah, I'm just going to go with this guy. He's promising me, I'm sure. I mean, I'm assuming my dad was a sweet talker. Like, I'm going to give you the world out there. Like, you're not going to be in this third world country anymore. You're going to be in like a nice place and da-da-da-da-da.
But I mean, also there was a civil war happening. Like things were probably really scary back at home too.
Oh yeah. And so, you could just imagine like, okay, like let's go get a better life. I trust you. Let's go. And then leaving like a civil war, coming to Canada. And then all of a sudden, like you're in an abusive relationship, but you're like, I just left all my family and my friends.
Yeah.
Maybe I barely started making friends here in Canada. Like, what do I do? If I'm not going to put up with him, like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Like, you don't know how the government works. You don't know what systems are put in place. Maybe they didn't have any systems back then. Like, she didn't know. She probably barely spoke English. So it's just like her boundaries probably got pushed really far, really fast because even maybe before he even said anything, she was just like, I ain't got nothing.
Yeah.
What am I going to do?
And even for a woman back in that day, like it's not like now where a independent woman is deemed. Like I'm sure there's so many reasons, and I'd love to talk to her about it and ask like, were there any red flags while dating? And I
don't even know if they dated, honestly.
That's probably a red flag.
No idea. I honestly,
you're such a guy.
I've never asked those questions.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how they met. I don't know like
you're such a guy.
I don't know if they were writing letters to each other while he was like, I have no idea if they even knew each other before my dad came over here.
Yeah.
I don't know if he just went back to El Salvador and just went fishing.
And you
just
have your mom here, like me. Well, you guys know my grief. My mom's not here. I can't talk to her. It's a one-way communication. And so like take advantage that if you want to, like ask those questions and get to know her. And I'm sure, I mean, it probably brings some pain, but maybe it'll be healing for her too, to like discuss.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's different culture too though. But I think as I'm seeing it as a Christian perspective, I think like the church needs to do better because we're told to submit to our husbands. Mm-hmm. We're told divorce is not an option unless there's like infidelity, right?
Right.
And then so it's like, okay, what do women in these instances, like what should they do? And I don't know. Like I wish first that they spoke out to a church and then they handled it like correctly. But you hear so many horror stories of like pastors know and they're like, well, you just have to take it. Like he's your leader and he's your head. And there are passages that are taken out of context where it's like, well, just pray, be quiet, pray, and like have faith. But your mom had faith. Like she prayed and she's stuck in the long run saying he's going to change. He's going to change. And 20 something years later, like he's not changing. And so there was one thing that I think I mentioned in another podcast that a pastor said where it's like, know your value, like as a woman, know your worth as a child of God, point blank. Like you are not supposed to be talked down to, like physically be in, like know your worth, stand up. And if you guys are married, but he's doing that, like separate. Like you do not have to be in one home. Like don't, especially how you said if there's kids involved, because we clearly see like it is a cycle. You weren't, thank God, you weren't your dad, but because of what you saw, you had no idea how to say, I love you to me. Like I have to like, I love you. Like, are you gonna kiss me? Like we would have arguments about you not being physical touch enough, of you not words of affirmation enough, but you didn't see that modeled. And so that's like, okay, he can learn it, but then not dealing with your anger of like, let me just hurt her or even like manipulate her. I remember you would tell me, she can't, if you leave me, like you're not going to survive. And I'm just like, nah, I'll be fine. But then you like put that in my head,
Yeah.
And if you didn't decide, which I always admire you because I feel like there's two people in every story. There's one who can say, this is my past and so be it. Like, this is what I'm dealt with and I'm just going to continue this line and kind of use it to justify their every move and be the victim mentality, like, woe me, and not change. Or on the other hand, and say, this is my past and I refuse like to have any point in it. Like, I'm not going to let this define me. I'm not going to let this pass on to my children. And well, I'm here today, like with you because you've put in the work and everyone around you has like testified to, again, we say pre-David and post-David, of that definitive moment where you were keeping yourself accountable. Like, who am I becoming? And is this the man I want to be? No. Okay, let me make changes and uproot. And you're still at it. Like, I'm in complete shock because I never said you should do independent therapy, like go on without me. Like, I never said that. And you yourself were like, I think I should go. I think there's things with my father and I should go because I don't want to be stopped. You said, I don't want to be the weak link. I want to be the best husband and the best father that I could be. And well, at least ladies, like, if a man is not willing to do that, like themselves take that initiative, then maybe that's your cue to, if you're married, separate. Like, don't have them speak into your life, because I believe that words are power. And if you hear them so much, you start to believe it. Like, there was a moment where I started to believe, like, I am selfish. Like, oh, I'm good enough for nothing. And that can start dictating your reality. So it's separate yourself from them. Don't let them have power over you and authority over you. Or, like, if you're not even with them, like, leave them. Like, if you're not married, if you have no ties, like, leave them. Like, that's not the man for you. That's not what God has envisioned for you. Because I think this is what a man should do. This is what a man who leads his house does. It doesn't wait for his wife and his kids to say, you're hurting me. You're repeating the cycle. You recognize it and you say, I'm I still have work to do. Like I got better, but I'm not my best. I still have work to do.
Yeah.
And I love that about you.
Thank you. And I think dating correctly is very important as well. Like getting to know them as much as possible. Like I'm sorry, but you love to say like, oh yeah, just get married fast and blah, blah, blah. Like we all did it and it's all good. Like getting married fast is like you're flipping a coin. Because did you experience all of their emotions, how they are?
Yeah.
And this goes both ways for women and men.
Yeah.
Like, did you experience like the whole spectrum of their emotions? Have you seen them at their worst? Have you seen them at their best? Have you seen them mad? Have you seen them happy? Have you seen them sad? Like, how do they react to all these things? Like, that is very important. Because again, the moment that you say, I'm going to marry you, you're like, this hopefully is for life.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think anybody gets married saying like, oh, this is a 5-year contract. Like, no, like if you're going to get married, like it's for life, right? And so like you want to make sure, like, will you experience absolutely everything? No, because I mean, when you're married, you go through like different things, obviously, but like to see them like mad and like see them how they interact with their family or whatever, like, do they like holding grudges? Do they get, hurt really easily? Are they very sensitive?
Like triggered fast.
Yeah, triggered fast. Like all these things are signs. And then just like maybe you talk about it before you get married. Like, hey, like maybe we should do some couples therapy or whatever, or like just individual therapy. There's all these things, but like if you really, if you're not married yet, if you really want to avoid this, the best thing that you could do is date correctly before you get married.
And when we did our dating podcast, we said like kind of like an interview, and you're like, well, why is it have like an interview feel? I'm like, because it's with intention. Like this is for marriage. Like I need to know everything up front. And remember, that was one thing that my mom would always advise me. You're like, it sounds bad, but it's like not get the mad purpose. Like let's see, but it's okay. Don't get married until you see the mad, whether it's for you or something else.
Yeah.
But when they get a ticket, when someone flips them off, and then you can see like gauge, whoa, like. Did he overreact? Like, was he took it out of proportion? Like, what is his kind of go-to, right? His instincts when he's not with a mask and having like perfect. Because I completely agree. I think when you're married, even if you do get divorced, it affects you. You are hurt. You take that on to the next marriage. You take that to your kids. You like. I noticed, and that I don't want to put the blame on you. But I noticed that like when I was being hurt, like it's easy for me to then hurt my kids. Like I would be like, well, you made me this way. Like you made me like resentful, and you made me snappy, and like I'm like, this is not who I was. And you start taking on certain characteristics of like your spouse, and you have to like break that up. So when you get married, it's not just, oh, here's this paper. It makes it official. You completely do what the Bible says, and you combine and you become one. And he starts affecting you, you start affecting him, whether for good or for worse, like whatever that looks like. And so I do think as a church, we need to get better. As a society, we need to get better, because how it says hurt people. It's just this cycle. And even if you say like in the book, like it ends with us, like we put a break to it, it takes a lot of work. And I mean, you can speak on that. Like you're doing the work. Like you said, okay, it's going to end with me. Our marriage is not going to be one like theirs. Our kids are not going to go through anything what they've gone through, but you're having to uncover like years of pain. You have to do the work that it's not fair, because you didn't do anything wrong when you were little. Like you were just living through it. It's not like you said, I'm going to partake into this evilness, and like you were just a bystander. And that's what we have to like know, that it's not just this happens. Like everything has a huge weight, like a huge significance. People are getting affected by your decisions, your actions, whatever that is. And I think people do take marriage lightly.
Yeah. And I would definitely speak against what you say. Like, I don't do it fast. I know some ladies, like, I think it's changing. We've talked about that.
Yeah.
I think that it is changing. But the ones that still like are twitching, like, I want to get married at 23. Like I always, ever since I was little, I said I was going to get married at 23. I don't care if we've only been dating for 6 months. Like I said, I'm going to get married at 23, and I'm going to pressure him until we get married at 23. Just like, nah, homegirl, like that's just
No, I don't think we're ever going to see eye to eye, because I think if you date with intentionality, it could work. And I think, especially if it's like, remember, it all goes back to why are you prolonging this date, right? If you're prolonging it and you're like having sex and you're like sinning and like for the wrong reasons, like, okay, you're not even dating correctly. Like, what's the point here, right? So it all goes back to what's the purpose of the dating? Why are you genuinely prolonging it because you're trying to get to really know them? But it's very hard to do that without getting feelings involved, and they end up even seeing a bunch of red flags. And because it's been so long that they're dating, they start justifying. Like, you can go wrong either way. So it all goes back to know your reason why you're dating and be true to yourself. And I know it's hard when you're in love. Like, I can't even speak on that because we got married super fast and I was super in love. But it's hard to foresee the future, and it's hard to foresee your kids and the effect it might have. But like, try to think of them like as much as possible. And if you can't have people in your life that will remind you, because it is a whole generation thing it's affecting.
Yeah, and the other side of that coin too is because I don't want girls to go to the complete extreme, or guys for that matter, of like, well, she's not the perfect one. Like, I saw these things, so I'm not going to marry her. It's just like, no. There's some things that like can work out. And you should also see what the type of personality that they have. Like, do they have like that personality where they do want to get better? Like, maybe they don't know how. Yeah. But like, maybe they just need to meet the right people or find the right resources to be able to be like, oh, like that's what I need. Like, I'll like do that and, you know, I'll get better. Like, and so I would say, date intentionally, date correctly. Take your time. From my perspective, take your time. Because we're talking about it with the context of you want to save yourself from this type of stuff. Yeah. Because a lot of women, again, once you're in it, you're just like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't know what girls feel because I haven't like personally gone through it, but I could just imagine like the moment you get married, and let's say like a week in, he puts hands on you, just like, well, you start thinking, I could just put myself in her shoes. What am I just going to tell the whole world like a week in and my marriage is completely like in shambles?
Or you start justifying it like, oh, well, I did arrive late, or I did speak to him poorly. Like, you start saying I did something, like I deserved it. Next time I'll just try better. Next time I'll just try, until a point where you're like, I physically or literally, I can't do anything. He'll always be mad. That's when you're like, crap, but then it's too late. Like, you allowed it for so long. Yeah. But I'd add to your list is, I think what worked here, at least, I knew you loved God and I knew you loved me. And you weren't perfect. I wasn't perfect. Like, we hurt each other a lot. But in my head, I was like, if you have God before me, you'll change because of him, not because of me. I'm going to hurt you. And I did hurt you. And I was like, I'm going to continue messing up. I might trigger you. I might do the wrong thing, whatever. Like, but if you love God and if you honor him and you know that he wants better for you, like, you're going to do that because you know he has something great in store for you. And that's going to sustain you. And then it'll make you a better husband for me. And so I don't know. Like, I know your mom loved God. I don't know about your dad's relationship with God, if he was just in it because of your mom or whatever. But I think it's so important. And I can't even imagine a relationship when one of them is not Christian or both are not, because it's like, who do they fear? Like, who do they honor so much that they're going to get better? Like, is it just in the name of myself? Like, I want to be a better person. And it's like, that's not enough. Mm-hmm. Like, in those situations where they see red, in those situations where it is justifiable, like they have a right to be angry and jealous or whatever. Like, are they their God? Are they going to get better for themselves? Because then all their emotions validate their anger. All their emotions validate. So like, there needs to be like a higher power of a standard. Like, this is what this person has for me. And I fear them and love them so much that I'm going to do that for someone else. Yeah. And in this case, it's God, it's Jesus Christ, it's the Holy Spirit. But I just don't know, like, who do you place your faith in? Like, I knew I loved you so much. Like, yes, I loved you so much. Maybe I was blinded by love. I don't know. But I knew, like, he loves God. And I knew you loved this might be weird to say, but like my mom, like I knew you loved and respected her and you were going to try for her too. And you were going to try for God and you were going to try for me. And I'm like, I see him. Like he's not changing as fast as I want him. He's not like saying the right things right in this moment. You're still hurting me, but I see your intent. And I had faith in God. I had to not like, besides having my faith in the little bit in you that I knew you loved God and me, I had to have faith in God and say like, God, I'm clinging on to you because this guy's changing so slow and like not fast enough. And so if God is not in it, like I have no idea how it's going to work. Like I can't see that working.
Right now, if somebody came up to you and said, I'm going through this, whether it's verbal abuse or physical abuse, you've gone through something, right? What would you advise them from a woman's perspective? Because right now you just said like, oh, you saw like my intentions, but I wasn't changing as fast as you would like. A lot of people, again, would probably thinking like, should have just left them then.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it does take something like a big drastic measure to really make the man like snap into it and just like, or snap out of it and just be like, I'm messing up. And sometimes it is the woman leaving.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Cause I think, I mean, my family, some of them watch this podcast, but I think they could have seen, like foreseen of like, nah, he's not treating her good, right? Like some of them have said comments like that of like, we watched your old vlogs and it was like, he's not like so obviously like you weren't verbally abusive in them, but he's like, I don't know if he loves her. Like they were a little on the fence. And so I didn't say anything. Like I didn't tell my family, like David's verbally abusing me. I think my mom, like there were some texts I'd show her and she would get scared because she's like, Grace, his dad, like just know who you are. And if it gets too far, like you need to leave. And I'd be like, okay. And then I'd kind of be like, should I stop sharing him with her? Like, is she judging me? But I knew she loved you. So it was easy for me to share with her. But when she was gone, like I didn't tell anyone. Like I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell my sisters who like now I'm like best friends with, like, because it's embarrassing. Like how am I supposed to tell these people like the man that I love that I have kids with, like is hurting me. And so I don't know, like would you, if I did say something and they, I don't know, sat you down, my dad or whatever was like, hey, this come to my attention, like she's going to leave, she's not going to be in under the same roof as you. Like how would you have handled that? Would you be like, F you, F your family, you're such a whatever, and just like made you not want to try at all? Or would you have woken up to your senses and be like, no, she's not overreacting? Because I have a feeling like part of you would be overreacting, like, oh my gosh, she's so sensitive and they're all ganging up on me and I knew it. Like, do you know how you kind of would have bent towards?
Maybe it would have been how you just said right now, like thinking that people are like ganging up on me, but like, because I've always grown up like that, and that's something I'm realizing through therapy right now is like I always felt like nobody had my back, so to have like your family sit me down and talk like that, and I'd be like, wow, like she just like ratted me out. Now the whole family's ganging up on me. I got nobody. Like, oh yeah, like I would be like that cat stuck in the corner, and just like usually when you have a cat stuck in the corner, just like I only have one option left, and that's bringing the claws out. And
that's because when you ask me that question, like what would you say to someone who's in that situation? Like part of me is like, don't stay in that situation alone. That's when you're the most vulnerable, kind of the most weak, and they can control you and they can say things to keep you longer. And you start not even believing yourself. You start like kind of giving your power away to the point where you never walk away.
Yeah.
So my first instinct is like, ask for help, like say something, get yourself removed from that situation. But then you have that scenario where if I did that, I feel like it wouldn't have worked for us. But then it's like, okay, is that good riddance?
And here's the thing too, like, and this is why it's so tricky, and I feel so bad for women that go through this. Because let's say that you do say something to somebody. You're putting a weight on that person. Whether that be your family member, a friend, whatever. Like, you tell them the moment, like, hey, like, he's being verbally abusive or like he's being physically abusive. Like, that person initially is probably A, shocked, and B, maybe chances are they don't know what to do or how to do it. And they don't know what you want them to do.
Yeah.
Because they're probably thinking like, well, do you want me to go confront them? Do you want me to say anything? Do you want me to call the cops? Do you want me to, like, whatever it is? And at the end of the day, usually I would imagine nothing really gets done or not much. And guess what? That person is not going home with you to protect you. You're going home by yourself with the person that you love but is abusing you. And that's a rough spot to be in.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember if my mom told people. I think she might have. And that's why like these feelings are coming up of like, maybe she might have said, but they were like, what do you want us to do?
No, but I remember you telling me like your father would get even more angry when she would reach out, and he would even take it out on them, that they'd kind of like start backing away from your mom. Like, okay, we don't want to get into, we don't want to get involved. But so like, what does one do? And that's why I think like your relationship with God has to be like this, because at that point, like, he's the only one who can sustain. He's the only one who sustained your mom. I think she has endured it. She's gone. She's out of it. But that's a long time.
I think the first step is to leave. It's the first and hardest step.
Yeah. And never go back. Like you're saying.
No, well, I don't know about never going back, but to leave. Mm-hmm. Especially if you have kids. Like, I'm not putting my kids through this.
Yeah.
Like, nah. Maybe you still do love them. But like, you're responsible for these kids.
Yeah.
You're responsible for their innocence. You're responsible for not putting them through trauma. And so I would say first step would be leave and then tell somebody. Because if you tell somebody and you're still in it, like they go like, what do you want me to do? Like, you're going back to him. Like, it ends up, I think most people go like, well, it's a marital dispute. Like, it's almost like you got into it, you get yourself out.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like people go like, well, if you leave, we're here to help you. But if you don't leave, we're not going to step into your house. Let's say like you own the house or whatever, like into your house, which he owns as well, and try to act like we're running the place. Like,
yeah, because he has authority in a marriage. Like legally, spiritually, even society now. So it's like, get yourself out, kind of like not under his house, under his ruling. Like, you decide you're moving forward.
Yeah,
as an individual.
Yeah, so I would say first and hardest step, leave on your own.
That's good.
Hopefully you have friends that you can like, hey, like, I just left my house. This is why. Can I crash at your place? Because then it's like who would reject that? Like, unless the abuser's like completely off of like the rails and people know it.
Yeah, but even what your mom did, like, there are shelters that will take women and children.
Yeah.
That you couldn't even go with them.
No.
Because at that point you were already...
I was over 18, so I wasn't allowed to go with them.
So you had to go with a friend.
Yeah.
And your mom and your brother went to a shelter. Have you asked your brother how was that experience?
He hated it.
Yeah?
Yeah. I'm sure he didn't hate it as much as going through like all that stuff.
Yeah.
But he, like, I mean, it's not that nice of a place. It's almost like a jail, really. Like, you have like certain times that you have to be back. Like, if you're not back, you're out of the shelter. Like, yeah, it's not fun.
But temporary. Your mom wasn't there. They weren't there that long. It was to make sure like her physical safety was good. And that's always, I think, care about comfort later. Like, make sure you're safe. And how you said, leave so people know, okay, they're serious and willing to help you. And then until you kind of brainstorm, okay, what's my next step?
Yeah. And like the difference between what we're talking about right now and the book is, in the book, at least in the 3 instances, the guy was always like really sorry.
Yeah.
And again, it was almost like a blackout. It's not to excuse it, but he was always sorry, and like it was like I embraced the darkness for a couple of seconds, but then I let go of it. But there's some men that fully embrace the darkness. It's like, I am going to terrorize this person,
Yeah.
and I'm going to terrorize this place.
And that's I was seeing like TikTok comments, and so many people were upset, like they don't like the book and the movie, like or the author, and they were saying, because they were saying like, oh, you make it look so easy, like just to walk away, just to end it with us, where men threaten their kids' safety, or they blackmail them, or they go after them 10 times harder. Like, it's not just like, oh, it ends with us. Okay, they're like, have you tried to get a divorce from a maniac? Like, he's not gonna accept it. And so in the book, it's like best case scenario, right? Like, he loves her, it ends with us, he understands.
Yeah.
But in real life, if he's a psycho and he's like, I can't even imagine what that horrible, like, I guess, torment, that's being tormented, like day in and day out in your thoughts, like you're not safe. And that's kind of a little bit of what your mom went through. Like, she wasn't safe. Your dad like loved her, but wanted to be done with her, but then would change his mind, right? And so it was like this back and forth. Like, she didn't know if she would be fine with him or not. Were you going to say something of?
What was I going to say? No, just that there's some of them that just embrace the darkness completely, and it's just like they're consumed by the pain and the anger. They're consumed, and all their thought is like, how do I get back? How do I get back? How do I get back at this person? Like, for all the pain that I'm feeling, they blame the person. They start making up like lies in their heads, and it's just, honestly, the way that I saw it was like, I am in complete control of this household. You know, and it's just like, yeah, that's really tough. And it is true. Like, the book really paints it out. Like, it's a lot of Hispanics might be like, that's a very white book, you know, like maybe that's more of like what an American family might go through. Like, oh, you're going to divorce me? Okay. Like, most Hispanics that I know that are very prideful and stuff, like, had the Hispanic lady pulled what this girl in this book pulled.
Yeah.
All these Hispanic people, like, just, they would have made a scene. Like, no, you're not going to do this to me. Because, I mean, Hispanics have a lot of pride, a lot of machismo, and a lot of, like, just, I don't know. They always want to portray themselves as, like, the powerful ones, right? So, yeah, it is hard. But I think regardless of the situation, if things are unsafe, if you have kids, you have to leave. And you have to, I think, so here's the thing. There's times when this, domestic abuse is happening and stuff, and the threats start coming out on both sides. I'm going to leave you and blah, 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 blah. Well, that just fuels the fire. So what I would say is, don't throw out threats just to think like, oh, this is what's going to make him change. It's not going to make him change, especially if he's embraced the darkness. That's not going to make the things change. Yeah. It's only going to make things worse. Stop talking about it and just do it. It's the best thing that you could do. It's just, boop, like, plan it perfectly. Don't talk about it. Just plan it. Boom. Leave. And it is what it is.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, it's very sad for all these women that are going through this. That is not as easy as how the book portrays it, but it is, the message is important.
Yeah.
Especially if you have kids, like, you can't be repeating these cycles. And the way that she got him in this book was, they just had a baby, and they were both like kind of lingering of like, are we going to stay together or are we not? And she was kind of like asking for space, like, just give me space. Like, I'll figure it out. Like, I'm not sure yet. They just have this baby. 5 minutes after having the baby, she's looking at the baby. It's a baby girl, thinking about her. And it doesn't really describe too much about what she was thinking about the baby, but I could probably imagine like, am I going to put this little girl through the same thing that I went through? Like, look at how I ended up. Like, no, the story has to change. And 5 minutes after having this baby, and they're both like, he had just I think he was still holding the baby actually when she was just like, I want a divorce. Just like that. It's written just like that. Like, I want a divorce, just out of nowhere. And he was like, please don't do this. Please don't do it. And she goes, what if this little girl came up to you and said, my husband is abusing me? What would you tell that little girl? And he starts crying, like, please don't do this. Please don't do this. Like, what would you tell her? Please don't do this. And tell me what you would tell her.
Yeah.
I would tell her to leave the guy, no matter how much she loved him, leave and never go back, because she deserves so much better. And that's how it kind of ends. And that's when she goes, oh, like, it ends with us. But the message is important. Like, some of us went through what we went through, and I don't know. I feel like the power of being a parent should be so strong that it's like, I don't want to leave. I love this man or woman so much. I don't want to leave, and I'm willing to go through it. But these kids aren't prepared to go through that storm. So this storm needs to stop. Like, I need to take these kids out of the storm. They shouldn't be going through this, and yeah, that's what I would say is, like, that's the most important thing for you to do.
I want to thank you, because I think that even that thought, because you did, when you read that, you texted me and you're like, if Araya told me, if you told me if Araya was verbally abused or whatever, and you said, like, nah, it would have been like, leave me or something like that. And I was like, wow. And I think now that you have this perspective, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like now you're mindful of how you treat me, knowing that Araya is watching.
Mm-hmm.
And she is going to base her marriage, or like the guy she wants, based off of, like, what did mom allow? What was the boundary my mom had? Am I going to accept that? Is this normal? And so I think you take that weight now, like, pretty heavy. You're like, okay.
Yeah, for both Araya and Elijah, because for Elijah, I'm teaching him how to be, hopefully, a loving man.
Mm-hmm.
One that puts his wife before himself, one that lifts up his wife. And for Araya, yeah, like, showing her how she should be loved, and I could do that through two ways, which is loving you and also loving her. And, like, taking her on little dates. I heard this podcast, I think it was, and this guy was talking about how he treats his wife. It might have been just a clip that I saw, or how he treats his daughter. And he says, like, sometimes he takes her on trips. Sometimes he takes her to nice dinners. And just, like, if I treat her like this, I know that no bozo is going to be able to sweep her off her feet.
Yeah. Because
before he swept her off her feet, I swept her off her feet. And I set the standard of, like, what she deserves. Mm-hmm. And it's not so much about the glamorous stuff. Like, I'm anti-materialistic stuff, right? But it's just the standard of, like, you deserve to be treated right. You deserve all the love in the world. You deserve to be treated like a queen. You deserve to be encouraged, lifted up, given words of affirmation for you to be able to fulfill the purpose that God's given you as well. Mm-hmm. And you can't really do that when you have somebody like, oh, you're nothing, and you're this, and you're that, and you're this name, and you're that name. Like, you're just garbage, and blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, you're getting beat down.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. Because now I can say with the full heart, like, the man that you are does not compare to who I married, and for the better. And now my kids, I can say, like, they have a great example of a good husband, of a good father, because you decided, like, yeah, my dad was a hurt dad, but that's not an excuse. I need to get better. And now your self-awareness, just, I'm in awe of it. People are in awe of it. And I think it's a beautiful testimony. So thank you, because you said, as corny as it is, that it ends with your parents' marriage.
I didn't say that. I would never write that line. But I mean, we've talked about it before, and I'll say it again, reiterate it. Like, regardless of what you've gone through, you were responsible of the actions that you take. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. Like, you can kick, scream, cry, whatever, as much, and be like, but David, I've been through this and blah. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The resources are limitless. Like that you can be better, you can be better. It's your choice.
Yeah.
If you choose to be a bad person, it's because you chose it. And that will have a ripple effect on your generations to come. Mm-hmm. And hopefully one of them, if you choose that path, one of them is like, it ends with us, you know?
Yeah. And from the non-abuser side, or the non-abused, like what I mean is the person who is taking all of the hits. Like you choose to have your identity, like if you accept it or not, right? Like if this is my worth, this is my confidence, this is my value. Like if you are taking it, you're saying, God, like you messed up. I'm letting this person define me. And that is going to have ripple effects, not just to you, but the people around you, your calling, your purpose. And we talked about it. Like it's your job to be in line with it because God wants to bless not just you, but people around you. Mm-hmm. So we all have a huge responsibility. And I hope you guys all like get encouraged, not discouraged, because I don't know, but I can imagine like someone going through this, especially in real time. Like my heart goes out to you. You guys are in my prayers. But please, like, don't sit in silence. Like, that is the worst thing you could do. Like, do nothing about it is the worst. Because I think when it's in the darkness, that's the enemy's territory. He is the kingdom of the darkness. So I totally agree with you. Like, leave. Like, get out immediately. Like, you put yourself first because you are a woman, a child, even if you're a man of God. And seek help. Pray about who you're going to talk to. Seek help. If they don't see the gravity of it or your identity as well, speak to someone else until they do. Because unfortunately, I would hope that every church and every Christian says the right things, but they might not. And so don't stop, like until you know, okay, this person is seeing me how God sees me. And read your word, recognize, like believe who God says you are, because that's where you should allow people speaking into your life how God does. Make sure it mirrors that when you read the Bible. And so please don't do life alone. It's so important that we are walking in God's purpose, and how he said we're taking steps to making sure that we're walking in it for not ourselves. We always say this, that it is not an easy walk. It will never be easy the right way. Probably will be the hardest, what feels like the hardest, but it will bear the most fruit, not just for you, but for your family, for generations to come. And that's the beauty of doing things correctly, that God uses it in such greater ways that we can imagine. So it'll be worth it. And so thank you guys. If you have been listening to us this long, we'd love to hear your opinions, feedbacks about maybe you read the book or saw the movie and want to discuss it. Maybe you have some stories, testimonies, or questions. We love hearing from you guys. So thank you. If you can like, subscribe if you haven't already, share this with someone. And until the next episode, bye.
See ya.